Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. It is Wednesday morning. I believe it is the 25th of January, and never in my life had I ever thought that I could invoke such madness in agriculture. And that's the truth. You post a video about something, and there's always someone that says you're doing it wrong, which is fine. We all have to have different ways of doing things in what we do. Because if we all did it the same way, we'd all be driving square cars with electric batteries and shit like that, which to me is not going to work, but whatever. So there's always some different way to do it. But when you have what I call closed-minded agriculture, meaning that you do the same thing that your great-grandfather did, and your grandfather, and your father, and yourself, and you're teaching your young children or your so almost an adult son to do the things exactly the way that your grandfather did, I can pretty well guarantee you that you have an off-farm job. Because what worked for your great-grandfather does not work for today. It doesn't work today. The seeds are different. The genetics are different. The herbicides, insecticides, fungicides, if you use those, are different. They are not necessary, but they are available. There are different products that are available to you that just mute what you're doing. So I go on my history, and history is a really wonderful teaching tool if you know what to do with it. So this is actually an older magazine now. It's maybe it's still in date, but it's a Successful Farming magazine, right? So I suggest if you don't have this, you don't have that, go ahead and get it. It's free. I don't know why it's free, but it is free. This is number 12. So when you read this magazine, say 10 years ago, they were talking about GMOs pretty heavily and applying fungicides to your wheat crop being a necessity in order to keep disease away. And it's like, wow, it's getting expensive to grow wheat. You got to put two applications of fungicide now, split apps on nitrogen, and whatever else you got to do. There's just all kinds of stuff. Then we'll just talk about wheat, because it's like, at what point does it become too expensive to grow a crop? At what point does it become too expensive? Now, when I was young, good morning, Miss Teresa. She's got my cold, cough, whatever you want to call that thing. She's where I was 3 days ago. I'm still there. Coughs are getting more productive now, though. So, at what point does it become too expensive to grow a crop? So, when I was a kid, you went out and you bought. I loved Huffman's wheat seed. Huffman's 89, I think, was the bearded variety, and Huffman's 91, I think, was the non-bearded variety. The non-bearded variety seemed to produce better wheat than the bearded variety, but it was more susceptible to going over. So we always tried to plant the non-bearded variety because it did yield 5-10 bushels to the acre more, which at that point was great. And that was in, say, the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And then by the mid to late 90s, it was, in order to keep that wheat from going over, you need to apply a fungicide. Okay. I guess we can do that. So you go out and you get your Bravo and you spray that on there. And then, like 2 weeks later, you start with a different type of a mildew. Like, God, I never had that before. Well, Mr. Pandy, this is like a two-part system. You have to do Bravo this week, and then in 2 weeks you got to do Ridamil, and then you got to come back in with Bravo just before you harvest, or you're going to have these funguses hit you. So we do that, and you start weighing what it costs you to plant this, because once you put the fungicides on, then they're like, oh, well, because you put the fungicides on, you can now put more fertilizer to it. and get a higher yield. Well, how much yield are we talking? 4 or 5 bushels? 10 bushels? Are we looking at 10 bushels? Well, if you were getting 60 bushels, you could get 80 bushels, 20 bushel bump for an extra, extra application, another 25 units of nitrogen on that last application of fungicide. Well, with the fungicide applications, then it became a problem with insects. Like, now, why is it that we've got insect problems now? We never used to have these insect problems. What's going on here? So I used to read this thing all the time, like it was my Bible. I wanted to know what the latest and greatest farming practices were, which was great. It's like, oh, wow, John Deere owns this magazine. If you don't believe John Deere owns this magazine, Green Equipment. I mean, you can just go on and on and on about, if John Deere doesn't own this magazine. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, there's a Massey Ferguson commercial at the back. At the very beginning, it's Dear John. So, you read that magazine and you're like, wow, so we're going to do this and we're going to gain 20 bushels to the acre. And our wheat's not going to go over. Okay. Well, at that point, then, we're using 3 different products. We're using Bravo, 720, and Ridamil, and then we're using dimethoate, or what the heck was the name of that stuff? I was really sensitive to the insecticides. I couldn't do it. My dad had to spray it, and he got to the point where he's like, you know what, we put charcoal activated filters in the tractors, and he was still getting numb around his lips and stuff, so he quit doing that. Quit growing wheat in about 2002 or 3. The last wheat we grew was over 100 bushel to the acre. It was like 111, 110, 111. That's about, for the acres and we loaded it directly out of the field. It was wonderful wheat, gorgeous wheat, had nice test weight. It was like 62-pound test weight. We got good money for it. You get a premium when your test weight is that high. You get a premium for it. So, anyways, that was the last that we grew. We quit growing it because geese were landing on the fields, which is always going to be a problem here. And it just got to the point that if we're growing $4.25 wheat and it's costing us $4.24 a bushel to grow it, what are we getting? The straw? Well, we needed the straw for bedding in the barn, which was fine. It worked out. But yeah, so as I aged, I actually put this magazine down. I didn't get it for a while. And now I get this magazine and I start to see stuff like this, gaining ground. That's on cover crops. Now, I didn't, hold on a second. I did not, I got this cold and it's killing me, so just, you're going to have to bear with me. Never ever have I seen cover crops advertised in magazines like this. It was always in Organic Gardener or Organic Grower magazine or online, people talking about cover crops. A few years ago, someone asked me if I ever was going to go back into growing corn and soybeans, and I was pretty adamant that I wouldn't unless things had turned around. Price-wise, well, price turned around, and I decided, hey, you know what? It's not a bad idea to go back into corn and soybeans, so I think I'll do that. And I did, and I had learned a little bit about cover cropping, organic matter, and things like that through magazines like this and the internet. Started listening to a few people that are really big into this on a large scale. David Brandt, Gabe Brown, a few other green cover seeds guys, Keith and Brian, I think his name is. Listening to those guys. And I've listened to guys like John Stevens, Maple Grove Farms. So John Stevens is another YouTuber. He's got a weird sense of humor, but I like him. I like him a lot, actually, And he has done this now, I think, for 9 years, and he has seen tremendous gains in his soil and tremendous gains in reducing his input costs. So when you have somebody like that that is doing this, not receiving a dollar from magazines and things like that, like say Gabe Brown and Green Cover Seeds, and they've got skin in the game. They want to sell you their cover seeds. They want to do all this. They want to sell you something. Whereas John Stevens doesn't want you to sell anything. He wants you to have more money in your pocket, just like I do. I mean, if you can do something that will put more dollars in your pocket by reducing what you're putting into the soil, creating a healthier soil, an easier growing conditions soil, than what you're doing, like your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your dad, and maybe your uncles or whoever have been doing for the last 70, 80 years. Because before 80 years ago, fertilizer just wasn't a thing. It wasn't a thing. It was rotations and cover cropping. It was green manure. They would plant different crops that would be green manure. They would graze their land, get that manure on there. They would just use a lot of manures and things like that. They were plowing though. They were not plowing. So the biggest advancements in soil health and cover cropping is the ultra minimum till, i.e. vertical tillage. I call it ultra minimum till because you're just cutting a slot this deep, right? And there's a clown out here, and him and his boyfriend get going at it once in a while, and once they do, wipe the cum off their chin, they get out there and they're like, well, it's comment on One Lonely Farmer's channel. That's what this guy does. And he's like, oh, you're tilling the ground in this BS and all that, no-till BS. Look, when you take a blade and you stick it in the ground this deep, like an inch and a half, right? We're talking an inch and a half. Now for soybeans, that's where you want to put your bean, between an inch and a half deep. That's it, just right down in there. If you got a no-till drill and you're drilling soybeans through green cover, planting green, you just want to use a roller crimper or your column mulcher and roll it down, that's fine. I purchased a vertical tillage machine because I wanted to actually slice, and I've explained this so many times and people just don't get it. They don't get it. I want this to be my mechanical cow. If you don't know what I'm talking about as a mechanical cow, I'm going to inform you. So when a cow goes across, an animal, cow, bovine, sheep, goats, whatever, go across the field, they bite, they step, they stomp, they trample, they piss, they poop, they do their thing. Boom. They move on in the grazing, in the natural wild world. So I don't have time for cows. I don't have time for sheep. I don't have time for goats. I don't have the patience for them. Because you got to move these things. And moving those over 1,000 acres for corn and 500 acres for beans, or 1,500 corn, 300 beans, who knows how many acres I'm going to plant yet. It's virtually impossible for me to do that. It would take a team of people that would cost me more money than it would be worth. So I'm not doing that. It's like, let's think outside the box, outside the box. What can I do to mimic what cows do, sheep do, goats do, or whatever animals do? I can buy a vertical tillage machine. I can set that vertical tillage machine to just cut a little bit. Hooves, as they're turning, dancing around, doing their thing, they cut the soil open just a little bit. That's all. Smash the plants down. They bite it off. Well, a vertical tillage machine, as it's going across the field, the first cut, or the first blade, and it's running straight, and it's only an inch and a half deep, mind you. The first cut is an inch and a half. It doesn't really cut much of the cover crop. Generally where the tractor is just going to slice it a little bit. But that first one starts to lay over that cover crop. The second set of discs, cut it. Here and there. Just not all of it, just cut it. Then there's the finger tines, will mangle that that cover crop, just break it, snap it. And then the roller, the firming baskets on the back, they'll come along and flatten that shit right down. Okay? So that's my mechanical animal. I will have a biomass product out there, biomass or biomass product, whether it's mushroom soil. It'll be mushroom soil. Anyway, so I put the mushroom soil out there. That's my urine and my poop. That's what it is. So my mechanical cow goes through after I've already put down the manure. I have cut 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep, not just minimally disturbing the soil. See, I want to do that so that my soil will dry out just a little bit at the top, just a little bit. I don't want to evacuate the moisture. I don't want to infiltrate a bunch of oxygen into the soil. I just want to create little channels where moisture can escape at the top 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and not disturb where I'm putting the seed. I want to put that, of course, the seed corn is going to go down 2.25 inches, right? 2.25 inches. Now, there's going to be more disturbance from the row unit than there ever will be from the vertical tillage machine. There's this little idiot out there that's saying, "Oh, you're tilling the ground, you're tilling the ground, you're tilling the ground." Yes, I am cutting a slot in the ground. Am I actually turning over the soil? No, I will not be turning any soil. The blades will not be angled. They will be straight. I will not be turning the soil with any mechanical shank or disc. It will just be a slot cut. True vertical tillage. Not a high-speed disc. If you don't know the difference, A, stop commenting on my channel, your stupidness. B, educate yourself. It's real simple. It's not hard. Google. G-O-O-G. If you don't like Google, go to DuckDuckGo. I use DuckDuckGo as well. When there's things that Google will not allow me to see, I go to DuckDuckGo. If it's a conservative way of thinking, DuckDuckGo. Google, liberal. So they're both great tools. Use them both. Educate yourself on what's going on out there. So that's the whole premise, to just get this crop in the ground as quickly as possible, maintain my cover crop, and technically no-till status. If you want to call it tillage, go ahead, call it whatever you want. I know that when I show it this spring with my little friend, when I show you what I've done this spring with my little friend, you're going to be, "I don't think that's doing you any good. It's doing nothing, man." That's what they'll say. That is exactly what they'll say. And it's okay, because we all have a right to our opinions. What I'm trying to do here, and I know that it's not making people too thrilled, is I'm trying to open people's eyes that there is more than one way to do something. And there's better ways to do things that's better for your environment. And I showed that in a video yesterday. So I vertical tilled this deep, 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and planted wheat through a corn crop and a soybean crop. And you saw the water running off of it. If I would have actually tilled that ground with a disc harrow, water, mud. It would have been absolute mud coming off of those fields. I would have been losing tons and tons and tons of topsoil per acre through water erosion. You saw the other guy that had worked it in the spring and planted his soybeans into it and never harvested it, never did anything with it afterwards. There was more mud running off of that flat ground. Flat ground. I mean, you could strike a laser across the majority of that farm. And that's, of course, water infiltration has been cut off by the collapse of the soil profile. The top 6 or 8 inches, created a plow pan, sealed it off. And then of course there were some comments about the sod guy. Same farmer, by the way. The sod guy is the same farmer. He was on my grandparents' farm. The water would run off of that farm so bad, it made me sick. Just they took a snowplow and pushed the topsoil out of the road, and that was when I was farming it. And I figured then and there, I have to do something different here. There is no way I can continue the way he did it and the way that my grandparents did it. My father was a no-tiller. He no-tilled forever. We no-tilled. The only thing we didn't no-till was corn or beans and wheat. The corn planter was the only no-till option we had. So I went no-till with the grain drill and all that. So if you see what he did this spring, and we VT'd it this fall, and you could see that living root, only cutting a little slot down there, probably infiltrated a whole bunch more water because it was no-till this spring. And there is worm activity there, and there is biomass there, and there is something, a living root to hold the soil in place. It's there, and it's doing its job. There's no washouts. I mean, the amount of rain that we've had since October, the road would be covered in mud if I'd have continued the way we were going. So we had to change it. And that's what I'm trying to tell people. Hey, look, you got to look at a couple of things here. When you're going to go to work in your field and you're going to do it conventionally, you need multiple implements. You're going to need a plow of some sort, whether it's the old-fashioned moldboard plow, a chisel plow, a ripper. People will use a ripper and then run a disc over it, which is fine. You're going to need a disc harrow or a cultivator of some sort to get that leveled back out again, and then a roller harrow or something like that, unless you're rolling baskets on your disc or your finishing tool. Let's just call it a finishing tool. You're going to need something like 3 implements to prepare your soil. And those things aren't free. They're not free at all. And it takes horsepower to pull them. So you're not going to go out there with a 150 horsepower tractor and do that operation over a couple of 3,000 acres of ground. You're going to need 200, 300, 400 horsepower to do that. And you're probably going to need 2 of those tractors because one tractor isn't going to get all that done. You're not going to be changing one tractor to another tractor, to another implement. When you're done with one, you're going to have 2 people going. One with the plow, one with the cultivator, and a finishing tool. Maybe it's a land leveler or something like that you can do it in 1 pass or 2 passes. But it's taking you iron, horsepower, fuel, and time. You have to figure all that stuff in. Now, you could go out there with a no-till corn planter or grain drill or whatever you've got, whatever you're planting, and you can just say, okay, I'm going to make a burn down pass with my tractor and sprayer, or my sprayer if you have a self-propelled sprayer. You go out and for $8, you put down glyphosate. Just burn it down. That's it. We're going to do a burn down. Okay, cool. Get out there and burn it down. $8. $8, so you're looking at 16, just for around $20 per acre. You go out and you do a burn down. You're still saving yourself $40, right then, because each pass is going to be $20, no matter what you do, say, think, or feel. Each pass on 4,000 acres is going to be $20. So you're $40 ahead of yourself right there. So then you go through with a corn planter and you plant, or your grain drill, and you plant, and your corn all comes up nice. Nice and even, because you spent the money on the row units to make, because even in conventional tillage, guys, I find it really funny when I watch these other YouTubers. They're out there, yeah, we're going to put downforce, and we're going to do this for the closing operation, and that for the speed, and this and the other thing, And, good morning, Miss Love. Anyway, you're going to do all this stuff, and then you go out there and you conventionally plow it and till it. So you've spent a whole lot of money to do probably the easiest job that planter will ever do, which is conventionally plant corn or beans. All the planters today are built to do no-till. All of them. For the last 45 years, they've been built. The John Deere 7000 Conservation was really the first John Deere no-till corn planter, or the regular John Deere 7000. Those are the same planter. The frames were a little bit different, but the row units were the same. They just gave you no down pressure springs, just these stupid little side springs. But you can put the down pressure springs on them and add weight to the frame, which I did that. I bought a John Deere 7000 4-row corn planter, which was a conventional tillage corn planter, and I converted it to no-till, put a front coulter on it, which I should have probably never done that, but I did put the front coulter on it. Most guys that are planting green, 99.9% of them will take those front coulters off. They take down pressure away from the openers, the disc openers, and they cause it to, that down pressure, they cause it to actually ride up and not get uniform seed depth. So take those front coulters off. A lot of guys will put row sweeps on. That's okay. I had them on the 7000 that I ran this spring. They wrapped up. I ended up disengaging them. Didn't even want them on anymore by the time I was done planting the corn. They just didn't do me any favors. Those openers are so sharp that they will cut through, they'll cut through bone. They will cut through bone. So you don't need them if you're no-till. So all these guys that spend all this amount of money, and friends of mine have done this. I'm going to use How Farms Work. So How Farms Work right now, Ryan and White and Travis, they're redoing their corn planter. They have a John Deere XP, Maximerge XP. I guess that's the newer model than what I have. I have a Maximerge 2 in my 7200. So theirs is probably a 1770 or whatever. Not even sure what model it is, but it's an XP. Basically the same thing. The row unit's a little different, has a little more heft to it to handle longer abuse. That's what it is. But they're updating the entire planter. They're putting high-speed down tubes in it, okay? So, and electric meters. So your electric drives for your meters, I want to say they're ag leader meters. That stuff is not cheap. By any means is it cheap. But they're doing all of this, and they're going to plant into a conventionally tilled program. They don't do no-till. I don't think they're going to go to no-till. Now, there's things that I see with their planter, and I just shake my head. I'm like, look, what do you need hydraulic downforce for when you're planting into a conventionally tilled ground? I mean, it's like taking a marshmallow, okay? Taking a marshmallow and putting one in the refrigerator and putting the other one in a microwave. Okay, so the soil consistency of the one you put in the refrigerator is a little bit firmer, and the one you put in the microwave is soft. You can take your finger and put it right to the bottom of it, whereas the one that's in the refrigerator, it has some resiliency. You don't need 500 pounds of downforce to put that seed into the ground in conventionally tilled ground. I did it with my 50-year-old corn planter and consistently dropped that seed at depth. Dealers will sell you anything that you're willing to buy, which is the truth. Now, that's their choice, and I don't hold it against them. I just see, okay, so we're going to take a corn planter, and we're going to make it a high-speed corn planter. We don't have to go 6 miles an hour anymore. We can go 10 or 5 mile an hour. We can go 10 mile an hour now. Well, the difference between 5, 6 mile an hour and 10 and 12 mile an hour, we'll just throw 12 in there because we're just doubling, right? So we double our speed. The things that can go wrong at 10 mile an hour are not twice as bad as what they are at 5 miles an hour, because your reaction time doesn't change. Between 5 mile an hour and 10 mile an hour, it doesn't change. But your velocity has doubled, okay? Your velocity. So take your truck and run it into, say, a big square or a round bale of hay at 5 miles an hour. You hit it, boom, the bale rolls away. No damage, nothing. But you double that speed. You go 10, 12 mile an hour. You smash into that same bale of hay. It doesn't weigh any different. But you smash into it. Before you know it, you've busted your grill, your airbags have gone off, and you've totaled your truck. Okay? So, the row units that they're running are the same row units that they ran at 5, 6 miles an hour. Now that row unit's going to run at 10, 12 mile an hour. Is there obstructions in the fields up there? I think there is. You know, you don't know. And it's fine. It's their choice. They can do what they want. I personally go bigger to go faster. You know, so I went from a 4-row corn planter that I was at 4.5, 5 mile an hour with at 32,500 plant population. Tripled it, went to a 12-row. A 12-row planter going 5.5 miles an hour, planting 12 rows. Got a lot more done in a day. Was going to go to a 16-row, but I won the bid on a 24-row corn planter. I can still go 5.5 miles an hour, right? 5.5, 6 miles an hour with my old-fashioned corn planter. But now I'm planting 60 feet wide versus 12 feet wide with the 4-row, or 30 feet wide with the 12-row. So it's just going to get done that much faster. I haven't picked up any speed. My inertia hasn't changed. The obstructions in the field, they haven't changed. They're still there. If I hit an obstruction at 4 or 5 miles per hour, more than likely the lid will pop off and the opener will just go over the top of it, and the closing wheels or the spike closing wheels will just go down the sides of it. But if I was to say double my speed with a 12-row to gain what I've gained with the 24-row, and I hit that same obstruction, shit's gonna bend, shit's gonna break, things are gonna go really wrong. So, but it's their money. I'm no-till now. I will not be going back to tillage other than my vertical tillage machine. Now that vertical tillage machine, and I've said it 100 times in this video and probably going to say it another 100 times, inch and a half deep. When I'm planting corn, I'm going to be planting the corn 2 inches to 2.25 inches deep. I don't want to go any deeper than 2.25. 2 inches is really where I want to be. That's where I really want to be, 2 inches. It seems to be in my experience that if I go to 2.25 inches, I have uneven emergence. Okay, so you really want even emergence across your fields. Good down pressure is important. Good down pressure. Speed is important. Anytime you pick up speed, you're going to lift in the soil. If you can, if you've picked up a whole bunch more acreage and you need to go faster, like I have had to go faster, go wider. I will be running both planters this spring. I'm pretty convinced of that. I'll have Timothy in one and I'll be in the other. And we are going to get it done. We'll get it done. Don't worry. We'll get it all in the ground. 1,500 acres of corn, something like that. Depending on how much biomass I can get home, which leads me to, I'm going to have to end this video because I'm going to go. But to everybody that is telling me that it won't work in their area, that I'm a jackass because, this vertical tillage machine is tilling the soil. I am cutting slots in the soil. I'm not turning the soil over. A vertical tillage machine does not turn soil over. Cuts slots, lifts a little bit. If you've ever gone through with a ripper, and I did use a ripper years ago. It was a single shank ripper with a mole on the back of it. You could see the soil lift and drop, right? And then I bought that 5-shank ripper, and it was like a wave between the ripper shanks. All right, so what did that do? That raised the soil, dropped the soil. fractured it, allowed water infiltration, and there you go. Minimal disturbance on the top. I never even worked that ground. I planted no-till right over the top of it. Did it gain me anything? I don't think so. I really don't believe it gained me 1 millimeter of anything. I did sell the thing. It's gone. I'm happy about that, and life is good. But the vertical tillage machine does that on a much smaller scale. So it cuts on 7.5-inch straight lines, but you can see that it actually heaves that soil just a little bit at the very top, fractures the upper part, fractures it, allows a little aeration, a little bit of water infiltration, and it softens that soil so that my seed will emerge. And that's another thing. I really want my seeds to emerge quickly, and I want minimal disturbance. So I will be, now get this, is I haven't said anything to anybody else about what I'm going to do, but if I plant my corn this way, I'm going to BT it this way. I'm going to cut them across so that I'm cutting through that biomass. I got to go slow. It's not like I'm going to be going 10 miles an hour, but I'm going to cut through that biomass as it's laid flat like this. Everybody's like, oh, well, in order for you to cut through that, to plant green, you need to have a roller that is as wide as your planter. I'm not buying a 60-foot anything to roll product down with, I'm not going to do it. So at least I'm going to experiment with it that way. I may have Teresa cut on an angle, and I plant on an angle. Therefore, I won't be going into laid down material, folding it back over, making it not lay flat. But if I do cut it across or on an angle, it'll cut that mat, lay it down, create a vapor barrier and a nice moisture retention, and it'll keep that moisture right where I want it to be. So if you've ever seen cornfields that go into drought stress, they curl up tighter than pineapples. People are like, oh, well, that's just a self-defense mechanism. Well, yes, it is, kind of. But the reality is that is moisture leaving the plant faster than it can pull moisture out of the ground. We need an inch and a half a week of rain in order to sustain a corn crop. That's what it takes per week, an inch to an inch and a half of rain per week to sustain a corn crop in a conventionally tilled situation. Now, as dry as we got last year, the best corn that I had that was planted in a timely fashion, you see, we had the first corn that I planted, the hay crop that I planted it through was not that tall. And I had problems with shading. The corn was shaded and became spindly. So the first crop that I planted through, it was maybe a foot and a half tall or so, 2 feet tall. The later stuff, it was thicker stemmed, stood up longer, and caused a longer shading action, and the weather dried out, and we had that problem. That's why I bought the vertical tillage machine, to lay that flat, so I have no shading issues. But everything that I planted early, during the day, that corn would curl up like freaking onions. And then at night, as the sun would hit that horizon, it would unfurl. So there was enough moisture down there to produce a decent crop. I was getting 160, 140, 160 all day long on that corn. I had gone through probably the worst drought we've had since 1999. 98 was dry, 99 was worse. So that's what triggered this in my head. I got to do more. I got to do more cover cropping. I don't want naked soil. I want a vapor barrier over everything. And if we do get wet weather, that's fine. You know why? Because not only will that be a vapor barrier, it'll protect the soil, and the runoff that is going to happen will happen. It'll happen. There's going to be runoff, but it'll break up the rain droplets before it hits that soil and causes it to splash, causing molds and fungus and mildews and things like that. It'll just break those raindrops down, preventing a crusting or a surface compaction, and it will stop it from eroding the topsoil away. So yeah, there was somebody that made a comment, oh, he's gonna go crazy when it's a cold, damp year. No, I'm not. I can guarantee you I am not going to go crazy if it's a cold, damp year. In the fall, when it's cold and wet and not frozen, and everybody that did conventional till is struggling to get their combine through their rows, I'll be sitting on top of that nice sponge that I created. Yeah, it'll be okay. We'll be all good. And y'all can just sit back, relax, watch what I'm doing, and enjoy the show because I guarantee you, that my research is good, it's true, and it's effective. If you want to watch me and criticize me, you will be the most surprised when it works. Now, if I fail, if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, if I fail, you will know because I will show it. I'll show it. I'll show my failures. I have no problem with showing my failures. It's not for me to say, oh, I'm an idiot. No, it's for you. That you could say, hey, you know what? One Lonely Farmer tried this. He thought outside the box. And this year he won, but next year he lost, or the year after he lost. But when you do this, you have to use a circle graph. A circle graph. Cut it into 6 different pieces. What did I do this year? What did I do next year? What did I do year after that, year after that, year after that, year after that, year after that? My yields, whether they increased or dropped. My inputs, whether they increased or dropped. My profit, whether it increased or dropped. If I've done all of this over the course of 6 years and my profits have dropped, then I will go back to the old standard. I'll sell the vertical tillage machine. I'll buy back a disc and chisel plow, and we'll go on with it that way. I will admit that I'm a jackass, and I was wrong, and I lost money. I can tell you right now, I've talked to some other guys in the area, and they say, you know, we saw your corn. Looked like shit. It looked like shit. You planted it, came up uneven, it was garbage. How did you do? I did okay. Like, really? You actually did okay? I said, well, there were some fields that were total garbage. And I said, but where you're talking about, I had a guy text me out of the blue. He said, I can't believe the size of the ears on that corn well, I won't even use the road. Can't believe the size of those ears. How did that happen? That corn looked terrible all summer long, but yet it looks like you're going to get a yield. I did. I yielded 120 bushels on that. The same guys doing conventional till, I didn't film their stuff because it was pretty pathetic the other day. But they 50, 40, 30. It was bad. It's real bad. So anyways, I think I'm on the right path. If you think I'm on the right path, keep watching. If you think I'm on the wrong path, stick around all summer long and I'll show you what I've done wrong. I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to hide it. I'm going to show it.